Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 6, Episode 2, The Big Salad. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well out there. I'm doing all right. It is spring break for my children, so got that going on. My son is at basketball camp all week, which he loves, and he was super bummed he had to miss a day because he was just a little under the weather, not feeling well. But fortunately, he got better pretty fast, so he'll be there 3 out of the 4 days, which he was still really bummed about, but that's just how much he loves basketball and these camps. But anyway, he's back to it today. Also, something that I wanted to highly recommend to my listeners, because I would assume that you'd be into this. You know, I'm sure the Venn diagram of Seinfeld fans and Curb fans would be pretty, I would think the overlap would be pretty thick, but you never know. But for those of you who are fans, and I guess who aren't, it is worth watching. I just started rewatching the season. It's season 7 of Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is on HBO. I knew it was awesome because I watched it real time, but season 7 is when the entire season is pretty much the Seinfeld reunion within the show. So Larry, in order to win his wife back, Cheryl, who he separated from, he thinks, oh, if I can get Cheryl a role on the Seinfeld reunion, I think I can win her back. You know, it just has to be that shallow. And yeah, so we see basically a Seinfeld reunion within Curb, which is just, it's so brilliant. This is such a random thing to talk about, but I just happened to like randomly watch it. So I wanted to address it because I think, again, a lot of you would appreciate it out there. If you haven't seen it, it's worth watching because, you know, they've done a lot of these reunions in real life with different shows like the Friends reunion, the Harry Potter reunion, and they're so nostalgic and fun. I mean, they're very fan serving, but I'm all for it. I loved the Friends reunion. I thought it was amazing. I loved seeing them all back on the set again. And so, you know, I do not foresee Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David like agreeing to do that for HBO. But I also think they already got it out of their system by doing it for Curb Your Enthusiasm. Gosh, I don't even remember what the year was. It was season 7. I think they're on season 12. They're going to be starting season 12 soon. So it's been a minute since they did this, but oh my gosh, it is oddly satisfying. Even though it's a show within a show, you still get to see, I think, what they would have tried to do with a Seinfeld reunion. So Season 7 of Curb Your Enthusiasm. I highly recommend it for all of you Seinfeld fans out there, which I'm assuming is pretty much all of you. All right, let's get into this episode. The synopsis for The Big Salad is as follows. George is annoyed when his new girlfriend takes credit for the big salad he purchased for Elaine. Mr. Pitt's new mechanical pencil gets Elaine unwanted attention from a guy at its stationery store, while Jerry is horrified to learn that his new girlfriend dated and was dumped by Newman. After Kramer's golfing buddy kills a dry cleaner, Kramer helps him avoid capture in a white Ford Bronco. This episode was written by Larry David. All right, we start out in the stationery store. First of all, I never really talk about the opening stand-up bits, but I do love this one. It's the one where Jerry talks about how many pens they're manufacturing, but you can never find a frickin' pen. We always reference this in my house. When we need a pen and we can't find one, we always say, "Where are all the pens?" Anyway, that's just a little glimpse into my home life. Okay, so we're in the stationery store and the sales guy asks Elaine if he can help her very creepily. He just starts out with the creep. She asks for the Rolomec 1000. It's a mechanical pencil. "Oh, I know the Rolomec 1000. "I'm sure you do," Elaine says. He says, "Well, it's very expensive." "It's for my boss." "What do you do?" "Whatever." God. Well, he says there aren't any in stock, but that he can order it for her and give her a call when it comes in. He asks for her name, Elaine. "Elaine. And your last name?" "It's just Elaine. Like Cher." And then he asks for her number. And she gives him Jerry's number, which causes Jerry to sort of turn around in confusion. He says, "You'll be hearing from me." And she walks out, "Okay, let's move along." Jerry asks her, "Why did you give him my number?" They walk out onto the street, and she says how the guy's got ideas and to just call her when the pencil comes in. And then they run into George and his girlfriend, Julie, and they're all really excited about it. And they express that with a big, "Hey!" George introduces Elaine to Julie, and she says, "Oh, Elaine's my middle name." Elaine says hers is Ike. To no reaction. Well, there's a really weird edit at this moment. I don't know if any of you have noticed this, but you hear George laughing really hard, and then when we see the camera cut to George and Julie, they both are just kind of not reacting. So I think initially it was just supposed to be a no reaction, but we still hear George laughing. I've always just thought that's a weird edit. George asks them to lunch, but Jerry just had a big bowl of kicks. Oh, that's very mature. Elaine? Julie really wants Elaine to come, but she says, no, but maybe you can bring me back something. And she decides on a big salad. George sort of doubts her. He's never seen a big salad at the coffee shop. Oh, she says they do. They have a big salad. Well, is that what I asked for? The big salad? She gets annoyed. You know what? Just forget it. Just no, I'll get it. What comes in the big salad? Well, Jerry piles on big lettuce, big carrots, tomatoes like volleyballs. Oh, Lord, so annoying. Well, George confirms that she'll be upstairs and that they'll meet her afterwards. And they all exit. Now, the actress who plays Julie is Michelle Forbes. Now, I know her best from Star Trek: The Next Generation. Any Star Trek TNG fans out there? She played Rolaren, and Rolaren was one of my favorite characters. I just love her. So, that's what I know her best from. She's also been in dozens of other films, television series. She's been in everything. I know she was in True Blood as well. She's so strikingly beautiful too. So like whenever I see her in something, I'm like, oh, that's Rolaren. I admittedly never refer to her as Julie. I refer to her as Rolaren. But I really like her as Julie. You know, it's kind of a different type of girlfriend for George. Again, I have to say it. What the hell would someone like Julie see in George? Why? I mean, like I said, she's strikingly beautiful. She's very classy and sophisticated. George, really? Anyway, I think Michelle Forbes is fantastic as Julie, and I really enjoy her performance. My take on the scene, I think it's a very funny scene, really good opener to the show. Jerry Levine, he plays the stationery store guy. I think he's hilarious. He displays the perfect level of creepiness. It's not over the top. It's not too subtle. It's just right. And I like that we're seeing right away another menial task Elaine has to perform for Mr. Pitt. You know, we just came off of the socks fiasco in the last episode. JLD plays this scene so well. You know, she's trying to get through this task, you know, and inside Elaine's just hating that this is her job. So it's bad enough she's at this store looking for a mechanical pencil, a very specific one for Mr. Pitt. But now she has to deal with this guy coming onto her. And I just love how savvy Elaine is to protect herself. You know, no last name, and she gives Jerry's number. It's sort of this small moment, but very demonstrative of, I think, what a lot of us women have to do so fucking often. I'm sorry, but we do. Like we sometimes, like when we least expect it, we have to deal with creepy dudes. And just a PSA for dudes out there, look at what this stationery store guy does to Elaine. I mean, just look at this as an example of what not to do. The interaction when they see George and Julie is also very fun. I have to say, I don't get this Ike joke at all. I was hoping there was more of an explanation beyond what Ike refers to, which is Dwight Eisenhower, the president. But there's nothing else. Like, I just don't understand why Elaine says that. I wasn't sure. Like, I just wasn't sure if there was something I was unaware of. Like, oh, people would always introduce themselves as with their middle name is Ike or something. I don't know. Yeah, I don't get that moment. I wish it was just better. I love that Julie insists that Elaine comes with them. It's just a cute little moment, and it just really displays how kind Julie is. Just, oh, please come, Elaine. I love that. It's very sweet. George's reaction to her big salad request is so quintessentially annoying of George, very on brand. It's obvious he's got this different persona in front of Julie. He's sort of flexing that, and it's at Elaine's expense, of course. And it's a very Elaine response to give him attitude. Just forget it. She just gets so quickly irritated. She doesn't have a different persona. Fuck him, she thinks. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. Elaine and Jerry are discussing how embarrassing dating has become. Elaine says, I feel like people can always tell when I'm on a date. Jerry declares people on dates shouldn't be allowed in public. It's bad for them. It's painful for us to watch. He says he's got a date later. He's not even going to take her out of the house. Elaine says, good for you. I don't need a bunch of people staring at us. They hear some commotion out in the hallway. Turns out it's Kramer with his golf clubs. He is irate. He swears he's never going to play golf with Steve Gendison. Elaine's wondering, why does that name sound so familiar? Well, it turns out he's an ex-ball player. Kramer met him on the course, and they've played together a lot for a couple of years. But today, he lost it on Kramer for enforcing a ball cleaning rule, and that they got in each other's faces like an ump and a manager, and he does it to Jerry, which is hilarious. Elaine doesn't see what the big deal is. And he says, hey, a rule's a rule. He's a believer, without rules, there's chaos. My take on this scene, not much to the Elaine portion, but I do like that conversation with Jerry at the top of the scene. Her support of him not taking his date out always makes me chuckle. Good for you. And then Elaine sort of plays the role of the audience after Kramer comes in. We all need an explanation of who and what the hell he's talking about. So I think that's why Elaine is in the scene, to sort of be like, who's Steve Gednison? What's the big deal? It's just kind of the audience representation is what Elaine's doing there. All right, next we're at Monk's. Julie and George are having lunch. She's talking about some columnists she really enjoys. Anna Quinlan, Sapphire. Don't you like Sapphire? George clearly has no clue who she's talking about, but of course lies and pretends like he does. She goes on to say how Bob Herbert's great. Well, George finds an in sort of here, to contribute. And he says, what's interesting is the quarterback from the Atlanta Falcons is named Bobby Hebert. No awe. So you've got Herbert, Herbert, and Hebert, Hebert. He's just thinks this is the most insightful thing he could ever say, and even tries to get Julie to say the names. And she's like, oh no, I couldn't. The waitress comes over to deliver the check. George takes it, but Julie offers to pay. He says, come on, don't insult me. It's totally meaningless who pays for lunch, and she thanks him. Then the waitress comes back over to hand them Elaine's big salad to go, and Julie takes it. Then we see George kind of glance over as Julie walks out holding the big salad. All right, wanted to mention the waitress here. So this is the first appearance of Lauren Bowles, who plays the waitress, and she in real life is JLD's half-sister, and she will go on to appear in 9 episodes of Seinfeld. Not much to say here about her performance, but I just wanted to mention her. I do think in the future, with the future 8 episodes she's in, she gets some really funny moments throughout the series, like giving George the inadvertent or very purposeful middle finger. Lauren Bowles has appeared in many TV shows, many movies, and is 4 for 4 for every single TV show that JLD has been in, which I think is to be expected. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. The phone rings. It's the stationery store guy. After Jerry hangs up, he turns to Elaine. He called to say he ordered your pencil. Elaine says, I told you, he has ideas. He doesn't even care if a man answers. Or you. Elaine's very proud of herself for that one. George and Julie arrive. Julie hands Elaine her salad. Thank you, Julie. Oh, you're very welcome. We see George looking very irritated. Well, Julie has to go. She has to meet Mother at the Guggenheim. You sure you don't want to go, George? He says, I'm not much of a Guggenheimer. So Julie exits and Elaine goes to the bathroom. George asks Jerry if he saw what just happened here. Well, that all depends. So he explains that Julie handed Elaine the big salad, even though he bought the big salad. She just took credit for my salad, and that's not right. Jerry, you can tell, is very much humoring him. No, it isn't. Don't you think she could have said something? She could have. You buy someone a big salad. It would be nice if they knew it. Jerry says, obviously. Kramer busts in and tells them to put the television on. There's a story about a dry cleaner who got murdered, and Steve Gednison has been taken in for questioning about it. And it was reported that an irate Gednison was seen leaving a golf club, which causes Kramer to freak out. Maybe the penalty stroke pushed him over the edge and he murdered the dry cleaner. Jerry claims, you know what, you don't need any extra incentive to kill a dry cleaner. I wouldn't worry about it. My take on this scene, this is really a George scene, and Jason Alexander kills it. I just love, this is very much Larry David wrote this. It was also revealed in the Inside Look that this I'm talking exact situation happened to him. He bought a big salad for the editor, Janet Ashikaga, and Jerry's assistant, I believe, handed her the salad, and Larry never got a thank you, and it annoyed the shit out of him. So this is literally lifted out of Larry David's life. And of course, Jason Alexander just kills it. I do love that Elaine got that little moment in the beginning of the scene, ripping on Jerry after the stationery store guy calls. Such a fun moment. And I love that we see Elaine herself really enjoying that she totally got Jerry. All right, next we're in the cab. Elaine and George are sharing a cab, and she mentions how much she likes Julie. She's very personable. And that's great, George. She gives him a little pat. He asks if she enjoyed her salad. Oh, yes, she said. Actually, it was too big. Why? And George is kind of doing this thing where he's trying to say it. He wants to, you can tell he's like bursting to blurt it out. But he's skirting around it a little bit. He says, she handed you the bag. I mean, I could have handed you the bag. She just happened to pick it up, even though. He kind of keeps doing this even though thing. You thanked her, even though. She's like, what? Even though what? What are you trying to say, George? So finally he comes out with it. I was the one who actually paid for the salad, even though she handed it to you. That's all. Elaine's like, oh my God, do you want the money for the salad, George? Then what's the problem? There is no problem. It's just a small miscommunication. You thanked her instead of the person actually responsible for purchasing the big salad. Oh, Elaine just buries her face in her hands, like, cannot believe it. But she can believe it. All right, my take on the scene. Woohoo! We get an Elaine and George scene. So great. We also get a rare moment between these two. Elaine feels genuinely happy for George. That's great, George. It's so sweet. I love it. I love it. But of course, George has to ruin it. I mean, let's face it, we can't have a moment like that last too long on an episode of Seinfeld. Come on. Every time I watch this scene, I feel that same level of annoyance that Elaine feels throughout the scene. That way George is he won't say what he's trying to say, and it's just so irritating. And that's just a testament to both performances in this scene. They're so well done. And her reaction when he finally says what's on his mind is perfect. You want the money, George? Then what is your problem? And that face rub at the end, it just fits so well as well. We just feel that. We feel Elaine so hard at that point, and I think we'd all rub our faces from our top hairline down to the bottom of our necks, just like she does. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. He's telling his girlfriend about what happened with Kramer as she's reading an article about Gednison in the paper. Now, the actress who plays, her name's Margaret, is Marita Garrity. She's appeared in Groundhog Day, Sleeping with the Enemy, and she really doesn't seem to act anymore. I don't think there was a credit beyond 2002. I think she's fine. She's sort of blah to me. I think she plays a character exactly how it's called to be played. There's not really much to Margaret, but yeah, she's perfectly fine. She's not bad. She's not great. But back to the scene, she wants to go out, but Jerry refuses. We already know how he feels about it. He doesn't need a bunch of people staring. Come on, it's embarrassing, he says. The phone rings. It's the stationery store guy again. He gets off the phone. He doesn't even want to explain it to Margaret. There's a knock at the door, and it's Newman. He asks about Kramer and Gednison, and Jerry's not giving up anything. He gets so frustrated, but then he sees, Chunkies on the counter. Then he spots Margaret. They have an awkward interaction, and turns out they used to go out. Then Newman exits. After Newman's gone, Jerry's like, you went out with Newman? Why? She's like, I liked him. You liked Newman? Well, she's uncomfortable talking about this. Oh, I'm sorry, but why did you stop seeing him? He asks. He ended it. Why? Does it matter? No, of course not. But of course it does matter. Kramer busts in and tells Jerry they found a tea in the dry cleaner. All right, next we are at Monk's. Jerry is so distraught by this news. She went out with Newman. Elaine's like, there must be a mistake. No, it's not a mistake. And he says, as disturbing as it is that she went out with him, he ended it. And Elaine's just like, what? And Elaine thinks, perhaps there's more to Newman than meets the eye. No, there's less. It's possible. No, Jerry says he's pure evil. And then Jerry says, oh, the stationery store guy called. He's got your pencil. Elaine says, you gotta be kidding me. No, he made a special trip to the distributor. She says she got one yesterday on 14th Street. Well, why did you do that? You knew he was ordering it. She wanted to please Mr. Pitt. He says, well, you better go down there and tell the guy. He's very excited about it. Oh, man. Elaine's so stressed. Julie enters and approaches the table. And it turns out she's meeting George there. Elaine says, well, I better leave so George won't make me buy him lunch to make up for that big salad he got me yesterday. Julie is curious. How did you know that? My take on this scene, it's pretty transactional for the most part. We just need all the stories to move along. The Newman stuff for Jerry, the pencil stuff for Elaine, Julie finding out that Elaine knows about George paying for her salad. All necessary info to get out, but there's nothing super funny about any of it. All right, next we're at Newman's apartment. Jerry confronts Newman about Margaret. He needs to know why he stopped seeing her. And he simply says, she wasn't his type because he needs a really pretty face. And hey, that's me. And Jerry leaves. All right, next we're at Jerry's apartment. Kramer enters with a golf rule book and states that the rules are very clear about when to clean a ball. Jerry points out, it was just a friendly game. Why do you have to be such a stickler? Well, that's how I was raised, he says. Well, it seems like Kramer had some very stringent rules growing up. Jerry's like, why are you so worried about this? Well, apparently Gendison talked about Pincus on the golf course. He was super pissed at him. So it had nothing to do with you, Jerry says. But Kramer's like, what if the penalty stroke pushed him over the edge? Poor Pincus. Poor little Pincus. Jerry changes the subject. Hey, you met Margaret. You think Margaret's attractive? Oh, yes, Kramer says. Natural beauty, no makeup. I like that. And the curls, you like the curls? Oh, I love curls. And then Kramer leaves. He's going to see Gendison. He has to. It's weighing on his conscience. All right, next we're at Monk's. Julie and George are having lunch, and George is making conversation about how he could have played with dolls when he was younger. It doesn't seem like a gender thing. He thinks he would have liked to play with dolls. You can tell Julie's not really paying attention or amused, so she brings up how she was talking to Elaine before. Oh, we're just friends. Yes, well, anyway, she said something that was kind of intriguing. So she quotes Elaine about how she said she better hurry up and leave before George got there so she wouldn't have to buy him lunch to make up for the one he bought yesterday. He's kind of like, okay, I'm not following. Well, Julie wants to know how she could have known that George bought the big salad for her when, she was the one who handed her the bag. She must have assumed, George says. Did she? And George is trying to weasel his way out. Are you suggesting that I made a special point to tell her that even though you handed her the big salad that I paid for it? That's what I'm suggesting. And then he caves and says, well, it was a big salad. And what I'd like to know is how someone who has virtually nothing to do with the big salad takes credit and accepts a thank you under false pretenses. Huh? George, all I did was hand someone a bag. And Julie exits. All right, next we're at the stationery store. Elaine is explaining to the guy her boss is very demanding and he needed the pencil right away. Well, why did you make me order it if you knew you were going to buy it someplace else? Elaine's like, no, I didn't know. He says it took him 3 hours. He got in a big fight with the foreman. She feels awful. I'm so sorry. Yeah? Well, how about going out with me tonight? Okay. My take on this scene, once again, the actor who plays the stationery store guy is so funny. JLD is more reacting and supporting here, and it's totally great. I love that final okay that she gives him. You could just see how grossed out she is. And he could probably see how grossed out she is, yet, he's still going to go out with her. And just some social commentary, I have to make it, but I hate that Elaine feels too guilty to say no here. This is a great example to all young girls and, well, I think every woman out there. You never need to go out on a date with someone who guilts you into it. I'm putting myself in his shoes. Like, you can see her going, okay, like she's almost going to throw up at the thought of going out with you. Like, do you really want to go out with that person? All right, next we're in Margaret's car. She's talking about the dry cleaner murder and Gendison and the tea. And Jerry's distracted. He just can't stop thinking about her dating Newman. You had how many dates with him? And then what happened? I told you he stopped calling me. I'm not hung up on him. He's just kind of staring at her. Why are you looking at my face? Oh, where else am I going to look? And then she tests him. Kiss me. He goes in and tries. I can't. And then Margaret throws him out of her Ford Taurus onto the sidewalk. Newman. All right, next we're at Jerry's apartment. Jerry is telling Elaine how Newman ruined his relationship with Margaret. He couldn't even function after that. All he could think about was Newman finds this unacceptable. Elaine breaks the news. Well, I'm going out with a stationery store guy. I felt so guilty. I couldn't say no. Ugh. George enters, goes right up to Elaine. I'm not treating you to lunch anymore. He lays into her about telling Julie about his annoyance about the big salad stuff. Elaine totally doesn't know what to say. If it were a regular salad, I wouldn't have said anything. But you had to have the big salad. Jerry gets a phone call telling him to turn on the TV. Turns out Gennison has evaded arrest and was spotted on the highway. We find out that Kramer is a driver, of course. In the car, we see that Kramer is on the phone telling the police to back off, that Gennison wants to see his fish. And then he and Gennison get into an argument about the route and ends with the, just drive. My take on this scene, just one little comment. I feel that Elaine would argue her case here with George when he points out what she did. It just feels like a good moment for like a fun Elaine and George exchange, where they really get into it, like the pea pipe stuff. I just don't think she would cave here. Her sort of non-response has always felt a little off-brand to me, a little bit like a cop-out. But yeah, I mean, I think they're getting to the end of the episode, so they probably didn't have time for it, but I'll get more into that later. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Hi there, I'm Bob Herbert. And I'm Bobby Hebert. Almost the same name, but not quite. Bobby and I have been friends for years because, people kept mixing up our names. I'd get his mail, and I'd get his phone calls. One day, I just rang Mr. Bob Herbert up, and we had a good old laugh. And the rest, as they say, is history. Knowing the close friendship that can come out of having similar names, we had a brainstorm one afternoon after a rousing game of Mexican dominoes. We sure did, Bob. We thought, what if this is a thing? Perhaps unrelated folks with the same or similar names just have a natural inclination to becoming incredible friends, like us. That's when Bobby and I came up with our podcast, Same-ish, Name-ish, where we invite two celebrities with similar names to come and meet each other. And we can tell you, it's interesting. Sure is, Bob. For our premiere episode, we invited beloved actor Tom Hanks and supermodel Tyra Banks to meet each other, only to find out they have really opposite interests and views. Indeed, Bobby. Tune in and see what Tom Hanks had to say about Tyra's talk show. It's pretty shocking. Well, not as shocking as her derogatory comment about bosom buddies. That was uncalled for. At any rate, you won't want to miss our Banks and Hanks interview. Don't worry, they're not all contentious. We bounce back in the second episode with an unlikely love fest between Debbie Allen and Tim Allen. Bobby, I was a little nervous for that one. I was too. But after they met on the Same-ish, Name-ish podcast, it seems they are inseparable. They sure are. In fact, I just saw Debbie post a video of her and Tim at one of those board and brush places making wooden signs. So beautiful. Other episodes include Mariah Carey and Jim Carrey, Vince Gill and Vince Gill again, and a special three-way between Dean Cain, Michael Caine, and a Great Dane. Oh, that was a fun one. Be sure to follow Same-ish, Name-ish wherever you find your podcasts. And take it from us, our names were separated by a missing R, which apparently stood for missing relationship. I love you, Bobby. I love you, Bob. And we're back. All right, so there was a deleted scene. Jerry is commenting how he wishes he was more of a stationery store guy, someone who corresponds, keeps a journal, sends invitations. Elaine looks at him and says, "But you're not. You're a guy who wears sneakers and watches TV." It's okay. I can see why they cut that for time. In the notes about nothing, in the scene where Elaine asks George for the big salad on the street, when all four of them are talking, originally the scene ended with Elaine and George bad-mouthing each other as they walked away, with Elaine saying, "Ugh, what a head case," while George says, "What a nut job." So that's cut out at the end of that scene. And then in the cab scene, it was supposed to end with George looking at the meter saying, "That doesn't look right." And then Elaine exasperatedly says, "I'll pay for the cab, George." And I actually can see at the very end, like I'm always watching Elaine, kind of doing that little rub down of her face in frustration at George. But if you see at the very, very end, you see Jason Alexander like kind of notice something. So I think that's where he's supposed to notice the meter in the cab. All right, now it's time to open Greg's Sack Lunch. For those of you who don't know, Greg is our most trusted contributor, and he deserved his own segment, and it's Greg's Sack Lunch. So let's go ahead and open Greg's sack. All right, so the first thing I see is his favorite scene and Elaine moments. He says, "I have to start by saying this is in my top 3 episodes of the series and is probably the episode I've watched the most times as I had it recorded on VHS when it originally aired." Same, Greg. I did too. And I watched it over and over again as a teenager. Same, Greg. Me too. Basically, I have a lot to say. All right, let's get into it. He goes on to say, "Literally every scene of this episode, specifically the ones with Elaine, are fantastic. My favorite is when George brings up that he paid for the big salad to Elaine in the back of the cab and she gets irritated and asks, 'You want the money for the big salad, George?' Followed closely by when he gets mad at her later at Jerry's apartment for telling Julie. George's line, 'If it were a regular salad, I wouldn't have said anything, but you had to have a big salad,' is probably my favorite George line in the entire run of the show. Wow. He is so petty, and yet he is going to make it her fault that his relationship with Julie ended over something so stupid." Totally. And I have to say, just a little side note, my kids, they're not the biggest Seinfeld fans, probably because I like it so much. I don't know. And they're not rebellious like that yet anyway. But anyway, they just, they don't connect to it like I do. But they do love that line. The big salad, the little dance that George does. If it happens to be on and they see that little moment, they always laugh. Greg goes on to say, "Another perfect Elaine moment is when she agrees to date the stationery store guy when she disgustedly says, okay, her face acting here is Emmy caliber." Agreed. Yeah, I mentioned it a little bit before, but yeah, I mean, she looks like she's going to throw up. It's like making her sick to her stomach to say okay to this guy. And you're right, it's all in her face. Just more fantastic face acting. All right, next in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea. He says, "Aside from the aforementioned perfect scenes, I do love the Jerry storyline of dating someone who used to date Newman. I wouldn't take any of this out, and I love that Jerry and Elaine discuss that perhaps there's more to Newman than meets the eye. It keeps Elaine present for most of the episode. The only thing I would maybe take out is some of the Kramer story spoofing the O.J. Simpson news of the time. These jokes don't hold up, and anyone who doesn't remember some of the details of the O.J. story aren't going to get a lot of the comedy here. Again, they have to give Michael Richards something to do. I just wish whatever his subplot would have been, it wouldn't have been so topical." I totally agree, Greg, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in my final comments, but yeah, let's just say we're on the same page there, and I'll get more into that later. All right, finally in Greg's sack are his extra thoughts. He says, "How does George get these beautiful, smart women?" Julie is arguably the best woman he has ever gotten to even date his loser ass. Plus, she seems to get along really well with Elaine right out of the gate. We don't see a lot of George's worlds colliding other than with Susan, so I welcome this dynamic. Elaine even expresses she's happy for him, but then he ruins that moment. He's such a dick. Ultimately, it's so great we are finally getting to see a lot of Elaine on the show. Agreed, Greg. Gosh, it's so funny. We're on the same page. Yeah, I mean, Julie, really? It's so not worth, I guess, examining, but I mean, you want to get into these women's heads sometimes. Like, why? Yeah, how did George charm Julie to like go out with him? It just makes no sense. Like, they don't even have anything in common, it seems, from their conversations at Monk's. So it is so baffling. And I love that you love that moment too. Yeah, that little dynamic. It's so short-lived, but she seems to connect with Elaine right away. How fun! How fun is that? We don't see that very much. And also, yes, how that wonderful, genuine moment where she's happy for George in the back of the cab, and then he just has to poop all over it. So classic George. Thank you so much, Greg. As always, we love your comments. Why do I say we? It's me. I love your comments. Well, I guess I'm speaking for our listeners as well, because I'm sure they love them too. Thank you so much again. And we will go ahead now and close Greg's sack lunch. All right, on to my favorite Elaine moments. I love that scene with George in the cab. We keep talking about it, but that exasperation she feels, it's like palpable and so relatable. I love it. And then a close second is probably that little moment, that fake laugh at the stationery store when he laughs way too hard at her share comment. She's like, so funny. And my final notes. This is such a fun episode. Not as much comedy for Elaine as I would have liked. I'm coming off of The Chaperone, where I think Elaine got the perfect amount of comedy. So I'm just going to hold it to that standard. So she's in the episode quite a bit. So she gets a lot of screen time, which I love, with really fun folks. She has great chemistry with that Jerry Levine actor who plays the stationery store guy. So really, really great moments. It's just like she doesn't get a lot of the laugh lines. But, again, that's just me nitpicking. I wish she did get a little bit more involved with Jerry's plot. I'd love her take on Margaret, maybe an interaction with Margaret. I think that would have been fun. So that leads me into my scene swap idea. Just like Greg, I don't love that parody of the O.J. Simpson stuff. I don't even really think I enjoyed it at the time. This was just a few months after that brutal, brutal murder, which I'm sorry, was like a really sad tragedy and really disturbing. And it became such a kind of gross media circus. And, really, I don't know. I can't get into this, I guess. But, bottom line, I think the families of those victims just were not even considered with all the media hype and all this other bullshit about it. So, it didn't feel great at the time. And it certainly doesn't hold up now. And I've always sort of admired the fact that Seinfeld never wanted to do topical things so that the show would remain evergreen. So, and for that reason, because, hey, it might not hold up if we do really topical things. So, yeah, it's also surprising that they would make such a direct parody to O.J. Simpson with this Gunnison thing, because I'm going, wait a second. I thought this went against what especially Larry David would have wanted, but whatever. I guess he just thought this would be something that would work. So anyway, I would swap out some of that OJ parody Gunnison crap for more Elaine getting involved with Julie and George, maybe a Margaret interaction. Also, we could have used a scene with Mr. Pitt, maybe, a scene demanding the pencil right away. So it makes more sense that she'd buy it on 14th Street rather than just wait for the ordered one. Because that always kind of bugs me too. I'm like, Elaine, why would you do that? Overall, I do like this episode a lot. I had it on VHS just like Greg, and I have this whole thing memorized. I mean, it's kind of scary, but it's full of solid plots. But I just think it could have used a little bit more dovetailing. Larry David loves the dovetailing, and he didn't do it quite so much in this episode. And I think it could have used some of that to make it even better. Already a great episode, but just my little thoughts. And I think that's all I can say about the big salad. Thank you for listening. Also, please make sure to follow Hot and Heavy on social media. On Insta, you can find us at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok, it's at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me any questions or suggestions, any feedback, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next time.